Can you work from home? Can you decide yourself when you start and end your working day? So would you say that you work autonomously? If this is the case, I have another question for you. Do you tend to work more than you actually have to? So you work overtime? If this is the case, why is this the case? Is it because your employer tells you to do so? Or is it yourself? Do you exploit yourself? In today's presentation, I want to talk about this phenomenon that autonomous employees tend to intensify their work. They tend to work more than they actually have to. I think it's crucial to talk about this topic because so many of us are affected by employee autonomy, especially since the pandemic. Many people in my age group cannot even imagine not being able to work from home again, or having to be in the office from 9 to 5 every day and seeing their bosses on a daily basis. And many people want to have this autonomy, right? But is this always a good thing? Because this question cannot be answered so clearly, I want to address today this possible dark side of employee autonomy by asking the question, why do autonomous employees intensify their work? Usually, you will probably differentiate between two work environments. We have employee autonomy on the one hand and organizational control on the other. Employee autonomy, then I think of working from home, having flexibility in terms of where I work and when I work, when I start and when I end, when I take breaks. Sometimes I even work on the sofa. I attend Zoom meetings via Zoom, and no one tells me what to do exactly when. This can be contrasted to organizational control. There I think of pressure, I think of very tight time schedules. I think of this boss sitting in the office next door and telling me exactly what to do and when to do it. It seems like when I'm the employer, I can either grant my employees autonomy or control them. It seems like a dilemma. I have to decide, I have to make a decision. It's an either or decision. But this doesn't always have to be the case. I want to introduce you to Sue. Sue is working very autonomously. She received this amazing new fancy work phone, which she's very happy about, because it enables her to check her work messages, either from her home office or from the coffee shop, or when she has a doctor's appointment. She can make phone calls, she can access her calendar and attend Zoom meetings. It's really great. She really enjoys this autonomy and flexibility this device gives her. But when you look at it closely, you might observe that this device is promoting and limiting autonomy at the same time. So for Sue, she has the tendency to also reply to work messages after her work time, even right before going to bed. Maybe you know it from yourself. Sometimes you have your work phone with you, even on the weekends or during vacation time. What can be observed here is this implicit pressure to be available all the time. For Sue, it's increasingly difficult to draw boundaries between her private and her professional life. This phenomenon can be described in theory called the autonomy-control paradox, which you can see here in this slide. Here we don't have autonomy and control as a dilemma, as a decision, but we have it together. And we say it's a paradox because these two things seem to be mutually exclusive, but happen to be in place in many firms at the same time. And this interplay of these two practices actually has the power to explain work intensification. Organizational control can be very obvious. such as strict rules. It can be things such as pressure from leadership and pay-for-performance schemes. But when you think of SU, it can also be very hidden and implicit. It can be like these expectations that you think your coworkers want you to work harder and be available all the time. So what we realized in this project is that this big category of organizational control is kind of helpful in understanding work intensification, but it's kind of blurry when it comes to identifying the exact reasons for work intensification of autonomous employees. So what we did is that we developed an augmented version of the autonomy-control paradox, and what you can see here are 4 explanations for why autonomous employees tend to intensify their work. We distinguish between extrinsic incentives from the outside, from your colleagues, from your boss, from your clients, and from the inside, from myself. Here in the upper part, we have like the explicit reasons, such as strict rules and like pay-for-performance schemes. On the left and on the right, we have this rather implicit category. Things such as expectations, things which are really rooted in the company's culture. In the lower part, we have the intrinsic factors. Intrinsic factors means that on the one hand, it can be either like my own expectations. It feels like maybe sometimes I want to prove myself that I can do better and want to prove that my work is great, and maybe I'm very perfectionistic in what I do, and that's why I work more. Or the last category here on the right, lower part of the slide, which this happy face indicates is joy of work. I hope many of you know it, this phenomenon that you simply enjoy your work so much that you don't care if you work a bit more, if you're so interested in your work tasks that it's okay for you to work more. So in this project, we didn't only work theoretically, but also did analyze large-scale data. We had data from the Institute of Employment Research in Germany, and there are surveys done for employers and employees over a time period of 8 years, and it's representative for firms with more than 50 employees. And what we found, there are 3 main results, or these are the results I want to share with you today. So first of all, is that it's much more of a paradox than a dilemma. When you remember the slides I've shown you before, control and autonomy happen to be in place in companies at the same time. Second, this interplay of the practices actually explains work intensification. So in companies where both is in place, employee autonomy and organizational control, this leads to more overtime. And the third result is related to or augmented version of the the autonomy control paradox. And this is actually interesting because usually you would think it's the control which leads the effect, but it's not that the case. It's the intrinsic factors, it's the perfectionism, it's the joy of work, which is the main driver of complementarity in this environment, which explains work intensification. So, what are the consequences of this? That's what we were asking ourselves at the end of the project. Usually, when you would think of work intensification, of overtime, you would probably say, like, it's bad. It's like related to things such as burnout, negative mental health, lower well-being, right? But we were wondering, in this setting with intrinsic motivation, is it also the case that there are these negative effects? And interestingly, what we found out that in this interplay of these factors of control, autonomy, and intrinsic motivation, we couldn't find a causally negative effect on mental health and on well-being. So what can you learn from this, or what can you take home from this project. So what I learned is that there are many factors in place when it comes to work intensification, understanding work intensification in the setting with autonomy. And maybe it's really important to consider intrinsic factors, intrinsic motivation. And finally, maybe the dark side of employee autonomy is not as dark as initially thought. Thank you for your attention.